and I'm delighted to welcome Anna Manero from Sherborne School in
Thank
Dorset,
you.
and it's delightful to have Anna here. And Anna kindly has agreed to help those students that don't have piano lessons at the moment. So all of you who don't have teachers or currently sort of having trouble with lessons, there are a lot of things that you could do yourself. And I'm delighted that we can share this really interesting thoughts about this. So Anna, off to you. What are the tips you'd recommend?
Well, first of all, hello, and thank you for having me here today. It's been a pleasure actually to work on this because obviously we students usually have lessons regularly, and motivation and practice is something that happens differently when the students are having lessons. So we as teachers, we always constantly trying to motivate the students, and it comes from the teachers, I think most of the time. But in this special circumstances, I think lots of students are not having lessons for different reasons. It could be that the teacher is on furlough or has personal reasons why she or he is not teaching. So keeping motivation is harder, I think, when you don't have the teacher there saying you should do this and that. So I think what I would say to students is that you have to look at motivation from two angles. I think there is the internal motivation, the one that comes from you, what you want to do, why you're learning the piano, what's your goal, what you want to do with it. And then the external motivation, which is when you have a concert or you have an exam, or your teacher is saying you have to learn this in a certain amount of weeks, or a masterclass. So those two things can help you keep yourself motivated, even in these circumstances, because you can create things from both sides, so your internal and your external. So if we start with the internal motivation, I think we can talk about what you can do. So, for example, just thinking about what you want to achieve in the short term and in the long term. So we've had this lockdown for how many weeks is it? 11 or 12
Oh
weeks?
God, yeah, it's
Yeah.
yeah, it feels ages, but
Yeah. So I think so. At the beginning of the lockdown, I've had students who were preparing for a grade exam in the summer. So that could be one thing that the student could look at. Okay, I'm preparing for an exam, and I would like to learn my three pieces, my scales, and I want to improve my sight reading, and I want to do that in the autumn term, for example. So that's something that you can focus your practice on, and you can work with your teacher's suggestions. Maybe if you keep a diary of your lessons, or if your teacher write notes for you, that's also very useful. I usually do that with my students. We have an online notebook that I keep up to date, and I send them information on that. So that's one thing that they could look at. And then it comes down to practice. I think structuring your practice is key when you want to feel motivated, because even if if you think, oh, I need to practice, then it feels like such a big thing, practice. What do I practice first? How long do I practice? So, doing it at a time of day in which that you're fresh, that your body is rested, your mind is fresh, and then setting a time. And then again, if you're preparing for something specific, you could schedule your practice time. So within your practice time, you can schedule things to do. So you could do 10 minutes on sight reading, 10 minutes on scales, 25 minutes on pieces. So you have a little bit more structure when it comes to practice. I actually know a book that I really recommend, which is called The Musician's Way by Gerald Klickstein. He's a professional guitarist, and actually he does a lot of lectures and things around the world, and he works in America in a university there. And he recommends dividing your practice into 5 key zones, which are new, developing, and performance material, and then musicianship, and then and assessing your own progress. So there are a million things you can do. It doesn't have to be as structured as that, but having some structure in your practice, I think, can really help you in these circumstances. The next point would be looking for inspiration. I think for me, when I was young, it was it really helped me to look for inspiration out there, listening to concerts, listening to things. And it was, of course, more difficult for me because, back in the 1990s and the early 2000s, we didn't have that many resources as we have now. And I think pupils tend to forget what there is out there. We have so much that people don't think about it anymore. And I had to go to great lengths to get the latest magazine, that only came once every 2 or 3 months, or, record
that made
things
it
on
very
my...
special, right?
Yeah, it
Really
was actually
valued it,
very, very exciting to sort of, the anticipation. I remember recording things on my parents' VHS. We only had one channel that broadcasted classical music concerts and things. And I was always sort of, chasing it and say, oh, who is playing? Is it Keesing playing now, or Horowitz, or, someone? And I would record it. So it was more hard work, I have to say. But I did it just to keep myself motivated. I would read books that my teacher would recommend to me. She would lend me cassettes, things like that.
Yeah.
But now everything is there. I mean, you go on YouTube and you can look at so many different videos, excellent recordings, masterclasses, even competitions. I find with my students, I find that they get real inspiration from looking at competitions, because you see so many young pianists there, and usually they're the same age. So they can see what can be achieved. Sometimes they say, oh no, that's too difficult. I'll only play that when I'm 35 or whatever, and it's not the case. So I would strongly recommend them to look on YouTube and to look at international piano competitions. They do live broadcasts, or they do past competitions, masterclasses. The Royal College of Music or the Juilliard School of Music, they have masterclasses with people like Andras Schiff, and on different sort of repertoire, from concertos, chamber music, all of these things. And then you have Spotify, you have things that you can read online. I mean, the list is endless. It really is. There is a lot out there for
And of course,
inspiration.
now it's everything streamed for free, so you don't need to pay or things, and watch absolutely amazing sort of broadcasts from everywhere, really. Yeah,
Absolutely. And sometimes if you don't know where to start, because that could be another problem, when you have so much information, where do I start as a pupil? And I would say, just look at your pieces, look at what you're playing, who are the composers, and then go from there and type the composer on YouTube and see what you can find, or the pieces that were written by that composer, what sort of people play those pieces, if it's young people, or I don't know. So you can start from there. You can look at the period where they were alive, and look at other things that were being written at the time, and that could help your oral skills, your general musicianship, understanding of music. And it doesn't have to be that daunting, because I know when you have a lot, it can be quite difficult to select what to look for. So yeah.
very, very interesting. But I know, so we've touched internal motivation, and so I think you also mentioned external motivation. Yeah, so basically organizing, some things for you to play or something. Yeah, could we sort of talk about that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are things you can do at home yourself or with your school. I know that many schools in the country are trying to keep music alive, and they're working on different projects, online projects, recording projects, and I don't know how to call them, but overlapping projects, when you have many people playing together. I mean, it looks very complicated, but I know schools are doing that. So that is something you can join. I mean, the pupils could join that. I think it's quite exciting, because, it keeps that sort of relationship with others, which is so important when making music, and especially when you're a pianist, when you spend so many hours on your own. So do join any project that your school is doing, go for it. If you are learning outside school, or I don't know, your music department is not doing that sort of thing, I mean, there are things you can do at home. For example, you could organize a concert for your grandparents or for your family friends, and you could have a little bit of initiative and try to prepare 4 or 5 pieces. It doesn't have to be an hour long concert. It could be just your previous exam pieces or pieces that you enjoy playing, something that is not too difficult that you can, retake. And you could even play with your family. If your family is musical, you could play with your brother, with your sister, with your parents. You could prepare a little piece together. I've seen that online quite a lot, families coming together. And I'm not saying it's easy and it would be tear free, but it's something to try. It's a different thing to try. And then other things you could do are, for example, if you have some skills that you want to improve. For example, your sight reading is not very good, or you want to try improvising, or you want to do that grade 5 theory that you've been postponing for the last 3 years because you haven't had time. I think this is a time to crack on with those things. For example, ABRSM theory is something that requires time because you have to go through past papers and study all the different rules, and so you could do that. And there is help out there. There are books. The ABRSM, obviously, they publish books that go, in stages. But you also have online help if you want a sort of more taught approach. There's some channels on YouTube that help you with that. And I do know of one. Is a fellow music teacher. She's called Sharon Bill, and she has a very interesting step-by-step approach on ABRSM theory. Also, improvising is something that it's rarely taught, I think, because of pressures of life and things that we have to teach the students and things that they have to learn. But I think it's something that could be interesting, and especially if the pupil wants to explore the sort of more pop side of music. There's a very interesting YouTube channel called Pianist. I think that's how you say it. It's P-I-A, and then note. And she's a classically trained pianist. Her name is Lisa Witt, and she has a lot of tutorials on how to sing songs and play the piano at the same time, but also on very simple improvisations on basic chords, 1, 6, 4, 5, that sort of thing. And she explains it in a very step-by-step way. So, of course, it doesn't replace your one-to-one teaching and your teacher, because I strongly believe that contact is very important. But in circumstances like this, and if you want to just explore new avenues, it's interesting, I think. And sight reading as well. Sight reading is something that you have to do.
I found actually, that was news to me, but some of my students, they also wanted to explore a bit of this kind of less classical repertoire, and they found this app, Simply Piano, which I thought, I was quite skeptical about it, but it's actually quite good, and also you sight read because the songs are relatively short, and it requires you to sight read quite a bit, and you can, of course, there's different levels. There's quite complicated level stuff there as well. So yeah, I would also recommend it, and it's full of songs and also classical repertoire actually. So as a sort of guide for those who don't have lessons at all. Yeah,
absolutely. And you mentioned sight reading. I think again that is something that as teachers we tend to say, okay, here's this book, go off and do some sight reading on your own, or maybe you touch on it in the lesson. But some pupils have only 35-minute lessons. It's just not long enough. And I think having the time to actually sit down and sight read is so important. And if you're at home and you have nothing to do, why don't you do some sight reading? You could spend 10 minutes, and there are books there that you can use. Paul Harris has his series of Improve Your Sight Reading. I think they're fantastic books. Also, Joining the Dots by Alan Bullard are quite useful. And it's a different approach. Or you can simply go back to your previous books and then play pieces that you haven't played. Just make sure that it's not too difficult, because you don't want to be put off by it. You always want to, if you're a grade 6 pianist, you want to look at grade 4 or something like that, so you feel that you're making progress. So yeah, it's interesting to spend. And then one last thing I was thinking while preparing for this, if you have a friend that is musical and you keep in touch with, just do a little challenge. You could challenge your friend and say, why don't we learn a piece of music together? So you could do a piano duet, for example, if he or she is a pianist, and then you could learn your parts, and then you could record your part and send it to him or her. Or if your friend is a flute player, you could do the same. You could record the piano accompaniment and send it, and then your friend could send you the flute part. And of course, it doesn't replace the real music making, chamber music making, but at least it keeps you, occupied, and it's, you never know if after all this you might become lifelong partners. At least during school life, you could, play together for years. I've had students who've played for 5 years together, and it's so nice to see them, grow as musicians together. And that sort of really strong relationship is very interesting.
Gosh, fantastic. So I also thought that if you, of course, have anyone you can teach, it's quite a fun process, right? You sort of, if you think that you can explain something, you think, why is that then? And then maybe it encourages you to look it up more, So that's kind of process I found quite interesting. And how do you sort of motivate? How would you? I know you have a busy department. Your teachers, because everyone is of course struggling. It's quite hard to teach online.
Yes, I think it's quite exhausting. People find that sort of looking at the screen and slightly artificial sound that you get from headphones is quite tiring. I would say for teachers, keeping in touch with other colleagues is really important. So, joining a group, for example, or creating a group with colleagues from the same institution or from similar institutions. I mean, at Sherborne Girls, we work very closely with Sherborne School, which is the sort of boys' school, the equivalent boys' school. And we have, we do have a very strong relationship with the music department there. So if you're a teacher at the girls' school, go and ask your colleagues at the boys' school. Or similarly, if you work in a different school and you have a similar school around you, you could do the same. If you have a private studio, online groups are very, very interesting. And especially now, lots of people have sort of gone online to share their worries or ideas. I mean, I have found two very interesting online blogs on piano teaching. One is called Teaching Piano Today, and is set up by two teachers in Canada. And of course, it's out there for everybody to see. But they have tons of very creative ideas on teaching. They have free printables, things for little ones, repertoire. There was something really interesting. They sort of created a little post on how to give your students a little keepsake bag after a concert, a Zoom concert, so you could leave it on your front door and they would come and collect it. I mean, just little things like that. It's quite interesting. And the other one is Colourful Keys. She's a piano teacher based in Ireland. And again, she has a really creative blog, and she puts lots of ideas there. And they also have a Facebook group that you can join. So I think communication is very important. If you feel that you're struggling and you need help, just reach out. And people are very happy to help. I mean, you can find help very, very quickly these days through online posts.
And of course, this kind of feeling of support and that you're not alone. I mean, this is partly, this is why we basically do the series as well, because it's important to share, that you're not alone, and everyone is in the same situation. Doesn't matter whether you're like a concert pianist or you're really like a professional teacher. And also, everyone is sort of having these difficulties because it's very strange times for everyone.
It's very strange. And I think also what I have found, I mean, apart from the fact that I have two little ones that I have to look after and it's very intense, but I think spending some time at a piano as a teacher, we don't get that luxury. Most of the time we're very busy either teaching or, in my case, performing in concerts and accompanying people. And I have time maybe to prepare one program a year, if anything. But if you find that you have the time as a teacher to just practice something, I think it's very inspiring. It can really help you reconnect with the instrument and sort of find new repertoire for your students, or, and again, on this topic of reaching out to people, I belong to a group on Facebook of professional musicians, and this professional pianist, this lady, she said, well, I've had this time that I've never had before, so I have decided to record all ABSM pieces and put it on YouTube. So, her channel is Jill Morton, and she's done a great job. I mean, her husband and herself, they just, done it in about 1 or 2 months. And again, it's a great inspiration for herself, and also for her students and people out there who are looking for recordings on ABSM pieces.
Wow, but I just want to mention that all of Anna's tips are in our comments with the episode, so you will be able to see them in writing, so you don't need to sort of listen carefully, although you do. And of course, it's very important to sort of practice as a teacher. I totally understand. I think it's also, I think your self-confidence is growing, of course. And everyone has started as a concert pianist, so everyone really can play really well. So, yeah, very, very, very interesting. So in terms of books, you mentioned The Musician's Way, and what are the other books you recommend?
Well, for reading, that book is really excellent. It's got lots of different chapters on well-being as well, on preparing recitals, on your practice. It's really, really good. And there is a website that goes with it that you can access, and there are lots of things that you can download for yourself and for your students. And of course, some of it could maybe be geared to sort of more college students, but you could look at it as a teacher and then tailor it. This is a slightly more old-fashioned book, but I quite like old-fashioned books on piano practice. Sorry, it's the other way around. It's called Practicing the Piano, The Art of Practicing the Piano by Jeffrey Witten. And yeah, again, it has interesting ideas on memorization, practicing tips, and how to set up your own, yourself to practice, and again, well-being, being relaxed, and all these kind of things. And there is also The Inner Game of Music, which is very interesting, by Barry Green. It touches on performance anxiety and things like that. So if you want to revisit all these topics, is a great time to do so.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for your tips. It's really absolutely great, and I'm sure many find it helpful. And just don't forget that a lot of people like you, whether you are a teacher or if you're a student without lessons. But last question, really, what are the words of wisdom towards the parents? Like, how can they support students in this time and their children, basically?
Well, I think parents are they're key players in this situation, because obviously, they're with the children at home all day, and, trying to keep them motivated is quite challenging. But I would say to them, if you think about the teenager group, which I think is the hardest, because when you have younger children, they do as they're told mostly. So with our son, he's 6 and he learns the violin, and we have a routine for him, and he does it, and that's it. So there's no arguing. But for teenagers, parents, I would say, talk to your child and just establish a routine. I think is the most important thing. Just make sure that there is a time during the day in which they can sit at the piano and practice without any disruptions. You could help them with resources online. I was looking for things for parents on the internet, and I found that the ABSM website has launched a great platform recently on help making music at home, or keeping music alive at home. And there is a particularly interesting series which is called Classical 100, and have activities there. They have listening lists, very, very interesting challenges. So you could pick what would be suitable for your child, and I think it's a good thing. Also joining them, if you as a parent, if you're musical, if you learn another instrument, just do things with your child. Learn a little piece with them. record something together, send it to your family, the extended family. Just keep your music alive. Or if you don't play anything, you could ask your child to teach you, and that would be a great opportunity for them to be bossier than usual and sort of tell you what to do. They could get back at you, if you know what I mean. And it could be who knows, maybe at the end of this you'll be doing grade one. It's just join them, because it's you just need to make the most of this situation. It will pass, I'm sure it will. But just making the most of it is important. And last point, if you can, as a parent, keep in touch with your child's teacher, if that's allowed, or if keeping a two-way communication is important, and you could perhaps send to the teacher progress snapshots, little videos. We do that with our son's teacher. She's not teaching him at the moment. She can't accommodate him, but we've sent her a couple of videos of him just, he's learned this piece now, and what do you think? And so that's another way. Of course, don't overdo it, because teachers, are so busy. But, if just sending them an email or something just to say how you're doing is important, I think.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That was really helpful, and I'm sure everyone will appreciate these helpful tips. Thank you, Anna. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.